Hey guys, welcome to another MapleStory video, and today I'm going to be making a class review on all the thieves. Yes, I know there's Hoyeong coming out in some X amount of months, but I just want to make one now, okay? We can do a personal class review on him when he comes out. How's that sound? Just to make sure no one misunderstands, this is not a tier list or a top 5 thieves, so before you start rattling in the comments about why I rated X class stronger than Y, it's just my own personal review with a little objective statistics thrown in, okay? Okay, good talk, chat. So, let's start with Nightlord. Yes, the good old Chaosers back in the day. Nightlords are your throwing stars and knives thief class that focus on dealing tons of damage at a safe distance and being an expert at both mobbing and single target damage. Biggest appeal with Nightlords above the other thieves is that Nightlords are not only one of the few ranged thief classes, but they also have a very fluid playstyle. At this point, it is prevailing wisdom that of all thieves in the game, Nightlords have the strongest burst damage due to their amazing fit job skills, which can also be used to augment their mobbing utility. I remember when they first played Nightlord, even though I had an overall weaker damage output in the long run, in short bursts I did almost double the damage I would do as a dual blade. And of course, due to the nature of their skills, what with Showdown having amazing horizontal range, Nightlord's Mark having heat-seeking throwing stars that target mobs all over the map, and a big area of effective burst abilities like Shuriken, Dark Lord's Omen, you clear maps insanely quickly. Because of Nightlord's overall fluidity in their playstyle, being able to attack while jumping around and kiting enemies, they're a very popular pick for mid to high level players because they're comfortable to play. Now in almost every game I play, I'd rather be the guy holding a giant sword than the guy holding a bow and arrow, so my love for this class extends only to its practicality, not so much the theme. But after playing the class for a long time, I started to really understand why a lot of thief mains choose to play Nightlord, because it seems to be the best thief at doing a single thing. Notice how I say a single thing though. Apart from the granted downside of being squishy as a ranged class, from what I can tell, Nightlords are only good at doing one thing at a time. You're either a really solid single target DPS class or a really strong mobber, never both at the same time, which makes certain things like Lucid, Mulang Dojo, Dream Defender much harder to do on a Nightlord because there's either a key target guarded by a lot of mooks or multiple key targets, and the nature of projectiles makes them not clearly as reliable in those circumstances. Most of these sustenance comes from avoiding hits or through drain tanking, and Nightlord is the only thief class without an instant reposition skill. Dual blades have Tornado Spin, Bloody Storm, Shadowers have Phase Rush and Assaulter, Nightwalkers have Backstep, and their Shadow Swap, Phantoms have Penombre. Kadena has basically every skill as a mobility, you get the idea by now. Putting it all together, I look at Nightlords as MapleStory's just traditional glass cannon. Strong by all means of the definition, don't get me wrong, they're just the first to be deep 6th if it ever gets down to it. Shadowers come next, and they're probably the most underappreciated thief in the game, which sucks because they were the strongest thief back then when the damage cap was still 50 mil, since they could do 120, but I digress. Shadowers are the opposite of Nightlord's long-ranged and slippery playstyle. They focus more on getting up close and personal to kill their targets, so basically Nightlords are the ninjas while Shadowers are assassins. Unlike their ranged counterparts, Shadowers prefer to focus on hitting hard instead of fast. They have skills that have damage ratios rising well over 1,000. I haven't played Shadowers for over 3 years, but I have a few friends who still play Shadowers, and they're still great to play. Of all the fit job Explorer thieves, Shadowers receive the most balanced boosts. Shadow Assaulter brings back their old Assaulter skill, but on a much higher level, giving them 4 instant repositioning abilities. Trick Blade helps them with their rather weak mobbing, and then Sonic Blow is a huge DPS burst attack. As mentioned before, Shadowers' kit is pretty slow compared to their sister classes in favor of dealing huge amounts of damage, which makes Shadower the most early game friendly class. They fall off kind of mid-game, and then it's not until super late game when they start to come back. Shadowers also come with pretty powerful utility skill in the form of Smokescreen, which recently got super buffed to allow players to deal more damage while in the Smokescreen and avoid one-hit KO attacks from enemies. Shadowers come with a lot of attack and critical scaling in their kit, like most thieves do, which scales their damage up to pretty high levels. If memory serves, they're the first thief to reach cap damage before any other. In terms of weaknesses though, I would mostly argue that Shadowers are kind of a flawed class. Thieves are meant to be agile, swift, glass cannons that abandon durability in favor for being monsters and DPS. The problem is that Shadowers try to be both. They try to be like Bruiser thieves when their niche is not intended to be that. Way back in pre-Big Bang, Shadowers were laughed at for being the inferior thief class in every way compared to Nightlords, since they were slower, weaker, and their defenses didn't do anything to help out their class compared to Nightlords who could just jump around and kite enemies. Then, when Dual Blades came out, they were viewed as basically superior Shadowers, but with the addition of fit job skills, Shadowers finally have their own image as a class. Whenever someone asks me for my opinion on Shadowers, I always say this: they're the Dark Knights of thieves. Dark Knights are famous for being one of the most balanced classes in MapleStory, not too strong, not too weak. They're always like in the middle of the DPS charts and always a consistent class, early, mid, and late. Shadowers are kind of the same. I always see them in the middle of the DPS charts. They're a pretty well-rounded class. No real egregious weak points except in the mid game, which not many people are in at the moment, and they're just a really reliable class to play. Fun, at least, my Shadower friends say. They enjoy it quite a bit. I'm personally attached to Dual Blade, but hey, credit where credit is due. Speaking of which, dual blades. I'll try to be as unbiased as possible and say they're the best class in the game, 10 out of 10, 0 flaws, 0 problems, highest DPS. But anyways, dual blades are for all intents and purposes a shadower that throws out his shield and a lot of defensive capabilities in exchange for a hybrid of speed and damage, having arguably the best mobility of the explorer thieves and the most consistency. But let's be real, best part of dual blade, you get to wield 2 swords. Come on guys. Not as hard hitting as shadowers and not as speed blitz as Nightlords, dual blades they fit a comfortable middle ground with a nice array of abilities that all are unique in their own way, as opposed to the likes of, let's say, Nightlord, which has a similar skill every job, Lucky 7, Triple Throw, Quad Star. Almost all of dual blade's skills leading up to full chop are mobility skills that can be chained together to send you flying across the map and dragging mobs with you as you go along. And once you reach late game, you start to add some solid DPS skills to your repertoire with hyper skills and fit job granting you huge AoE nukes to work with. While they do excel in damage over the long term, their short term burst isn't too bad either. A far cry from the likes of Nightlord, but basically every class is. What I think they excel at more than other thieves is that they're really strong dodge tanks. Shadowers do have Smokescreen and Trick Blade, which gives them more free time to stand still while attacking, along with some other mobility skills like Phase Rush and Shadow Assaulter. Dual Blades have a ton of ways to survive in boss battles, even beyond Drain tanking, with attacks like Tornado Spin, Bloody Storm, Blade Ascension, even Final Cut giving them easy ways to move quickly in a fight, and also having the most amount of invincibility frames that can be used of any class, with Chains of Hell and Final Cut giving 6 seconds in total. I say that in pretty much 90% of all iframe skills in MapleStory involve immobilizing the person who's actually casting it, but Dual Blade's invincibility frames can be used anywhere. The second you use the skill, you can move again right away. Super helpful, especially when you're dealing with a lot of like 1-hit KO attacks against bosses. Still on the squishy side, so they can't face tank attacks that well, but deceptively hard to kill. Now comes the bad parts of Dual Blade. I love their playstyle a lot personally speaking, and ironically they actually got a buff regarding this, but Dual Blades have awful range. Probably the shortest melee range of any thief, barring their fit job skills and cooldown abilities like Sudden Raid. The rest of Dual Blade's kit is short range and can barely hit that far. If you were to compare Blade Fury to the likes of Nightlord Showdown and Shadower's Savage Blow or Boomerang Step, it's a no contest, they lose. Phantom Blow got a decent range buff, but even then that's still really short. Also does Anger, their hyper skills also short range compared to most other hyper standards, and though I won't undervalue the huge damage potential that comes out of that skill, it does very little for you in regards to mobbing. If not for all 3 of Dual Blade's fit job skills being amazing in terms of both damage and map coverage, Dual Blades will easily have the worst mobbing in the game. I actually still think they do have the worst mobbing of the thieves because the likes of Kadena, Phantom, Nightwalker, and Nightlord just always outclass them. Still though, reliable at what they do and a fun class, but that just might be bias. Let's see what's next here. We'll go in chronological order. Phantom, okay. So Phantoms, they're the trickster thief whose party trick they like to steal skills from other explorer classes, use them as their own. It's really good because it allows them to be the most versatile thief of the roster and having a lot of convenience to their kit. They kind of have a reputation among the Maple community as sort of a meme, having received some of the most underwhelming fit job skills at first glance of any class in the game and being just a huge balance nightmare. But in all seriousness, they're still a solid class with a ton of tools to work with, and from personal experience, they have longevity. True to their love for cards, Phantoms are a jack-of-all-trades type class, being good at doing a lot of things but not particularly excelling in any of them. I don't mean that in that they're not a good class because they get like straight B's in school. I mean it in a way where Phantoms are just reliable with anything. They can steal almost every activatable skill from explorers with, few exceptions, in exchange for buffs having a shorter duration and attacking skills doing less damage. Theoretically speaking, you have all the strengths of every class in the game without their weaknesses. Phantom's own personal skills are pretty good too, let's not forget about that. They come with a lot of colorful attacks, each with a unique purpose, and while most of their pre-4th job skills aren't the best, their 4th job is awesome with Ultimate Driver or Milagui in GMS, Tempest, and Penombre. Purpose of their personal skills I think is meant to be as general as possible so you can play around with the stolen skills. Most of the times when you're bossing you stick to using buffs like Rage, Cross Surge, and Final Cut I think for maximum DPS output, but you can also get super creative with your mobbing by using things like Arrow Platter, Frozen Orb to clear mobs up very quickly. Phantoms, they do have pretty lackluster range on their main attacking skills, but they don't really worry about that since they just steal all the good skills from explorers. What I think a lot of non-Phantom mains don't really understand about Phantoms is that since they're looked at as a jack-of-all-trades class, they're supposed to suck. And for a time they kinda did. Phantoms were pretty much the worst thief in the game from 2014 to 2018 I think, because they kept getting nerfed over and over since Nexon realized buffing explorers indirectly buffed Phantoms at the same time. I think the most notable example of this was when the Red update came out and explorers got super buffed, which then broke Phantom with grossly overpowered skills like 4th job Arrow Platter combined with Cross Surge giving 100% final damage boost and all that. They also got a ton of other nerfs like lower damage on their abilities, nerfs to stealing skills so there would be a cooldown every time you swapped a skill so you couldn't like keep swapping, and they nerfed a couple other things about the class. But all things considered, their kit in concept is awesome, which is why they're really good. Free revive, high mobility, high avoidability, critical hit rate, good in melee and range, extremely versatile as a support, attacker, or both, and in my opinion, alongside Dark Knight and Shadow are one of the most balanced classes in the game. Their fit job skills aren't even that bad either. I think they're quite underrated. Next is Nightwalker, right? Oh my god, Nightwalkers. Okay, so they got reworked back in 2014, and I dare say that post-rework Nightwalker was the most broken class that ever existed in Maple, more than post-Red Phantom, or the current Pathfinder, or even Xenon. I already explained Nightwalkers a decent amount in my strongest classes video a couple of days back, but I'll walk you guys through them very quickly. They are Nightlords pushed to the extreme, taking every strength and weakness Nightlord has and amplifying them. They're one of the best bosses in the game as both DPS and DPM due to the nature of their kit, the fact that you can animation cancel their quintuple stars with jump attacking. The problem with their kit is that they really suck at mobbing. They have an after attack in the form of Shadow Bats, just like how Nightlords have Nightlord's Mark, but the bats are much slower and take more time to form than marks. So even though they're the best bosses in the game for over a year, Nightwalkers were still pretty sucky when it came to about everything else. They were the definition of a one-trick pony. However, their damage output was so high you can solo endgame bosses with insanely low range. I remember soloing Chaos Vellum with only like 2.2 to 2.3. Most classes needed 3.5 mil base just to solo him in 2015. Then after they got nerfed in late 2015 and went down to being one of the worst thieves, Fit Job came out and they got a ton of love. Nightwalkers were one of the more favored classes when it came to receiving balance changes, and Fit Job fixed much of their bad mobbing with Shadow Spears and Shadow Bite. Greater Dark Servant is one of the strongest DPS abilities period, adding another Shadow partner and allowing you to swap places with it instantly 3 times. 3 free teleports that can help you dodge any attack you want. It's such a good skill, and now they're back to being the strongest bossing thief in the game, and their mobbing actually may be better than Nightlords because of their buffs to Shadow Bats too. High damage and attack speed with low utility and defense, although unlike Nightlords, Nightwalkers have a bind, invincibility frames, and a revive. So they're a lot better as a solo class. I'm not necessarily saying Nightwalkers are better than Nightlords because, as I mentioned before, they're Nightlords with more extreme strengths and weaknesses. Nightlords are consistent early, mid, and late game, but from memory, Nightwalkers are terrible early game and their mid game is a little below average. It's not until late game where they eventually blow Nightlords out of the water completely. It's mostly dependent on nuanced preference. Does Xenon even count as a thief? I mean, he's like a thief and pirate hybrid. Okay, you know what? We'll talk about him anyway. They're a kind of a hard class to get a read on just because they play as neither a thief or pirate in terms of playstyle. They have attributes from each, but they have kind of a unique way of playing. I will say though that Xenons have some of the most fun skills in the game, functioning similar to Phantoms in that they have a good combination of melee and ranged attacks, and like Phantoms they can adjust their skills based on the situation at hand. They had kind of a similar timeline as Nightwalkers, or rather the other way around because Xenons came first. Upon first release they were so broken they had to be hotfixed right away, and then they kind of fell out of favor, but over time they slowly rose and now they're super powerful again. Xenons are a healthy balance between speed and power, with their DPS abilities being fast and their mobbing abilities being strong. Pirates are fantastic mobbers, almost all of them, Angelic Buster, Arc, Corsair, Thunderbreaker, etc. And Xenons adopt that with all but one of their attacks being multi-hitters, and Thieves has some of the best attack speed in the game, which Xenons also have. Modal Shift allows you to switch between 1 of 3 skills for 4 different types of branches, giving Xenons the most amount of attacking skills out of any class in the game, barring Phantom with all the stolen skills they can get. Both class types are known for mobility as well, and Xenons come with a lot of it, having one of the best flash jump ranges in the game, a diagonal dash which very few classes have, and a vertical jump so they cover pretty much every single base, and then some. Fit Job did wonders for Xenon, taking what they are already good at and making them better at it. Having access to both Thieves and Pirates' universal Fit Job skills is really good for their kids since they can take the overpowered ones like Last Resort, Overdrive, and Resistance Infantry. Their personal Fit Job skills, Omega Blaster, Core Overload, and Hypergram Field Fusion cover both DPS and mobbing perfectly, a truly solid class. The only weakness I think most Xenons run into is that they are the hardest class in the game to fund, with the worst mid-game hard stack I've ever seen in my life. To fully maximize Xenon's power, you need to go for % all stat, which is very hard to obtain. Because if you think about it for a moment, every other class can get things like % stat, % all stat, flat stat, they can get even attack, they can get stat per 10 character levels for B-Pot and things like that. Xenons can only get % all stat and attack. And when making the transition from mid to late game, they have it the hardest since they really need the extra boost in stat to reach that late game damage. This is the main reason why not too many people play Xenons, because they have the largest paywall in MapleStory's history, even if you're in reboot. However, because of the nature of their scaling, Xenons have also the potential to do the highest damage in the game of any class. You just need a fat wallet or trillions of mess up. And I think last one is Kadena. Holy crap, this video is so long. I haven't gotten too in-depth with Kadena unfortunately, but I know a few things about her. As I mentioned in the last video, most of the newer classes released have high skill floors, so they're not very beginner friendly. Kadena is one such thief, being the best all-around thief in MapleStory, not necessarily the strongest, that goes to Nightwalker, at least in terms of bossing, but her kit is one of the best in the game, using her near infinite slew of mobility skills to decimate maps and enemies at the same time since all of her skills are AoE attacks. Kadenas are the most overtuned thief in the game, but only if you can exploit her main combos. She has high damage scaling, crit rate, excellent avoidability, and damage uptime in bosses. Her Flit Chop skills take this even further, with Apocalypse Cannon buffing her already high mobbing and burst damage, Chain Art's Fury and Maelstrom being even more AoE DPS to her kit that can be applied in both mobbing and single target. What all the other thieves besides maybe Dual Blades suffer from is that they can either do only bossing or mobbing, one or the other, never both at the same time. Kadena's can do both, with every single one of her skills having high damage and lines and having insane range. She's also capable of both buffing her own damage and debuffing enemies, allowing for a higher skill ceiling than other thieves due to the fact that her scaling is dependent on execution. I do want to also point out her longevity in terms of enjoyment. Being in modern class, she makes use of almost all of her abilities regardless of the job. Older MapleStory classes like Adventurers follow the paradigm of newer job skills being stronger versions of previous job skills, like Nightlord getting Lucky 7, then Triple Throw, then Quad Throw, or Fire Poison and Ice Lightning Mage's elemental attacks. Due to this, Kadena's kit isn't monotonous at all. You don't spam only one or two skills for the rest of your life like most do, and you can make use of all of your abilities. On to weaknesses. First one is that her early jobs are kind of weak, and it isn't until 4th job where her kit really starts to shine with her combos and ability chaining, no pun intended. But since you can easily reach level 100 in like half an hour, I don't even see it as a problem. Weakness number 2 is that she's the squishiest thief in the game, squishier than Nightlords I would say. 0 sustain, 0 defensive abilities, only one skill that gives her iframes but it also prevents her from being able to do anything, and arguably the lowest base defense of all thieves. She's purely reliant on avoiding, but if she fails to dodge the attack she will take massive damage, so stack potions as much as you can. Lastly, she's hard to play. Second only to Blasters, Kadena requires the most execution, which makes long-term play kind of, I guess, exhausting. Also, while some classes are a bit stronger with better mechanics, Kadena needs them. She's a beast if you combo properly, but utterly useless if you don't. You need to spend a lot of time to learn her playstyle or else she quickly turns into the worst thief in the game. That's about it though. High skill floor and ceiling and probably the best thief in the game all around if you play her properly, and pretty underrepresented. Alright, we're done. Now you guys can flame me in the comments. Dual Blade is still master class. Anyone who says otherwise is wrong. I'm just kidding, but in all seriousness, thieves are some of the most popular classes in Maple for good reason. They're fast, mobile, and they hit hard. It's a high risk, high reward playstyle that many players are drawn to. May not be the best class type that probably goes to warriors, but they sure as hell can dish out punishment. If you guys enjoyed, a rating would be much appreciated. If you main any of the 7 thieves, let me know in the comment section below. And tell me your pros and cons of the class too. But other than that, thank you so much for watching and I'll see you again soon in the next video. Take care.